All right, I got to call out these people who recognize that there was a gender divide in how people voted during the last US election. It's a men's issue. And of course, they will try to make it about race or something else, right? Look, black men respond to the Democratic Party, so they're recognizing it, right? What it is, the Democratic Party is openly hostile to men. Now, the Republican Party is just as hostile, but they keep it on the down low. So black men, like any man, decided we'll go over to the Republican side and hope we get better treatment there. That's what happened there. Now, let's get into this.
Cool, right here on YouTube.
Awesome. Okay, so obviously, during the 2024 presidential election, there has been a lot of finger pointing towards black men for not supporting Kamala Harris or not supporting her in the way that people supported Barack Obama. In fact, I want to start with this reminder.
Okay, so you say black men, so keep it on that. Recognize this is a gendered issue. This is a men's issue, right?
They're here just to remind everybody.
Now, I'm not going to bother playing that. Yes, he came out and shamed, and these guys will even talk about the demographics here.
Well, you mentioned manhood, and I'm glad you brought that up because I do want to show you guys something with the exit polls. And I know sometimes people say, well, exit polls aren't 100%, but there is a picture that is painted here that I do think that we should just look at for just a second. For the 2024 presidential election exit polls, if we look at sex by race, this was a big red flag, I think, or should have been a red flag for the Democratic Party. They received 77% of the black male vote. Donald Trump received 21% of the black male vote. And I compared this to 2016. He did not receive that much in 2016. Also, the other thing that I noticed.
Okay, the recognizing it's a men's issue. We'll get back to that. But listen to what she says here, right?
The election was the voters that are ages 18 to 30, not black voters.
Okay, why are you talking about black voters in general? See, that's what I'm talking about. Why are you talking about race? Black women voted for Kamala Harris. So this is not about race, no matter how much you make it about race.
Do you see that they're still unwilling to admit that they lost the black vote?
No, they didn't lose the black vote. They lost the men's votes. That's what they lost. Okay? Now we'll get into this guy here because, of course, this guy tries to make it gender neutral and says, holds out the olive branch to the ladies, right?
On young women. Our young men are struggling around the country.
Sorry, back that up a bit. Here we are.
Young people generally, when you talk about young men, what do you need to do to make up those numbers?
I think we need to end the false dichotomy that says that we need to either focus on young men or focus on young women.
How's it a false dichotomy? Obviously, it's not false to the man who voted. Kamala Harris, her one passionate issue was abortion rights, which is, do women have control over reproductive power? Which means men don't have any at all. It's a power grab. So what's this lame ass doing over here? He says, oh, let's not look at gender's issues, even though this is a gendered issue. Right?
Our young men are struggling around the country. There is a mental health crisis, there's an educational crisis, and there's a whole litany of other issues that we have to address and realize.
So young men are struggling around the country, but let's not make this false dichotomy. Right.
That is not to say that we don't need to care about young women. We obviously do, but it's to say that we need to care about both, because what's good for both is what's good.
So men are in trouble, but worry about both. Right. This is the false equivalency, right?
good for young men and making sure that they're graduating at higher rates, that we're addressing their mental health, that we're doing much more to address the loneliness epidemic that young men are facing.
Yeah, exactly. The women aren't lonely. Why aren't they lonely? Because women don't give a shit about being with men and men want to be with women. That's it. Like this never gets voiced, let alone what is the answer to it, right?
Is good for young women and vice versa. And we need to make sure that
It's good for young women, right? Right? This is begging. This is begging women.
at higher rates, that we're addressing their mental health, that we're doing much more to address the loneliness epidemic that young men are facing is good for young women and vice versa. And we need to make sure that we aren't going into that false dichotomy, because I know that we were in the lead up to the election.
It's a false dichotomy, guys, right? Men are doing a lot worse than women, but it's a false dichotomy.
When I talk to younger voters, or not even just younger voters, but when I was part of the National Finance Committee for Harris, and I asked in front of the committee as one of the youngest people in that room who helped them raise several $100,000 for the campaign, what are we doing about young men? I was told by other
Why are you asking that question? This is a false dichotomy.
people from the committee that I was ridiculous, that this was not something that we needed to focus on, and it was absurd.
Pause.
There you go. There you go. It was ridiculous. Men's issues are ridiculous. You know, that's the open hostility of the Democratic Party. That has embraced feminist. It has embraced the feminist hate movement. And telling this guy outright, and look at the sad, sorry look on his face. This beggar, this man with his hat in his hand. We men are in trouble, but it's a false dichotomy, man. You know, both men and women are in trouble. Just especially men, but not men. You know, like he can't make up his mind.
Everybody hear what they just said there? So this speaks to the point that Nina Turner made when she said that the Democratic Party emasculates men.
Okay, yeah, they don't emasculate men, they hate men. How is exactly them saying that we don't care about men's issue emasculating specifically? It's just hostility, period. Right? So why did you go on about race? Sabby Sabs.
I think in her terms, she was saying specifically black men, but did you hear what he just said? We don't need to focus on men. So this speaks.
So it's not specifically black men then, is it?
To, again, the Democratic Party always choosing to focus on identity, but not do anything really for that identity. Like it was obvious this election, there was a lot of push towards women. Like we got.
No. They focus on identity. They identify who's male and then they attack them.
We got to get the women. We got to get the women to come out and save women's rights and rah, rah, and all that kind of stuff. And there is a whole other demographic that is also voting as well. This is what the Democratic Party does, right? This is what they do. They find it, and sometimes it's a different group, but the reality is they find a group to cater to.
Right. Now, we'll get back to see what these guys have to say here, right?
As well, when we're talking about these exit polls, it does appear also that even Hillary Clinton performed better with black male voters than Kamala Harris did. So I know every now and then people bring up the misogyny issue, and we bring in Marcus in here.
It's a misogyny issue. So men voting for men is misogynistic. So when women who purposely vote for women because they're women, how come they're not called misandrist? Right? How come it's not called misandry? No, it's just women voting for their own self-interest or their own preferences, right? If women prefer other women, it's just their preference. If men prefer other men, it's misogyny. right? So, Sabby Sab, you're part of this problem by even voicing it in that way.
People are bringing up the misogyny issue. I get it, but that doesn't explain why black men.
You don't get it? Really? So these men see a woman who's hostile to them. They see a party that's hostile to them, and they choose not to vote for them, and therefore it's misogynistic. Right.
More black men voted for Hillary Clinton than for Kamala Harris. So the point that you mentioned there, Dion, about this manhood, so to speak, Nina Turner made a statement recently that the Democratic Party emasculates black men. Do you think that has...
Well, Dion's about he's the best one on the panel. But again, they don't really emasculate them. They disrespect them, right? If that's what they mean by emasculation. But it's all due to the hostility. They hate them. They don't like them, right?
has something to do with it. And I'll go to you, Mark, and then I'm gonna bring in
and Sabby, that means it's not misogynistic for men not to vote for people who are against their best interest.
Marcus.
I didn't necessarily. I don't know if I think the Democratic Party emasculates black men. I don't know if that's how.
Really? So if that's the case, what is the case? Look how slow he is. I don't think that they do. If there was another reason, he'd come right out and say it. And look at the title, Black Men Respond to the Democratic Party. It's a gendered issue. That's exactly what's going on. This Dion guy knows, he admits it. He says so. So this Mark guy is part of the problem.
I would think about it. I think the Democratic Party just ignores black people. I think they just disregard.
See what I mean? It's gender neutral. Even though there's a gender divide, it's somehow gender neutral. Let's make it about race.
Black people more broadly. I think that.
And of course, Jamal here is nodding his head. Why are you nodding your head, dude?
It's been said a couple times today. I think there's an expectation that we're going to be Democratic voters no matter what. And the moment that we're not Democratic voters, the moment we even question being Democratic voters, we sort of get thrown away. I think the Hillary Clinton voting is an interesting.
But black women did vote Democrat because Harris was on their side. She was friendly. She's going to worry about their issues.
Thing. Again, I agree that it's too simplistic to say that it's just about gender.
No, it's not too simplistic. That's what it is. And again, guys, do you see what's going on with these people? Right? Let's not make it about what it is. Because these guys don't want to deal with the fact that women are hostile to men. Period.
But, the Hillary Clinton versus Kamala Harris comparison is just so tough because we're comparing 2016 to 2024. We're comparing different economies. We're comparing people having lived through Trump. We're comparing all these factors. People having a familiar.
If it's just economy, how come there's a gender divide? Are you suggesting the economy doesn't affect black women like it does black men? Well, if that's the case, you'd be on the right track because it does. Because men who don't earn their way get discarded. Women are taken care of. That's the truth, right? That's like in this one, where is it here? She talked about the working class. How come they don't make it about the working class? I'll tell you why, Sabby, because women aren't a part of the working class. Employment means something to men who have to work. Women find outs. They marry wealthy men and they stop working. That's why.
Familiarity with the Clintons. And then there's also the fact that don't nobody love white people more than black people. And so there are people who will vote for a white person who doesn't represent their interests, but will question a black person who's equally problematic and equally doesn't represent their interests, but they're going to give them the extra.
Trump, even though he is not pro-male in any way, he will not do anything for the working class, nevertheless said something along the lines, one of their false promises. He said, we'll bring back jobs to America, right? And jobs are important to men because men have to work for a living, right? That's why they did it.
The extra examination. So I wish, in other words, I wish we were more critical of Hillary Clinton. It's not that I wish more people voted for Kamala Harris, it's that I wish fewer people voted for Obama and fewer people voted for Hillary Clinton. Unfortunately, that often ain't the case.
That's an interesting point there. I want to bring in Marcus. Marcus, if you can just introduce yourself to everybody really quick. And I want to get your take on this as well, why Donald Trump gained support from black men and Kamala Harris lost support from black men.
Yeah, exactly. So you keep mentioning gender, yet this guy, Mark, he thinks it's about race. Why do you keep talking about gender if it's about race?
First off, I want to say, oh, can you hear me okay? First off, thank you for inviting myself and Chris, and pleasure to be here with the rest of the gentlemen. Apologies for being late. You guys know how LA traffic can be. But what I would say is I agree with all the points that I've heard so far. And what one thing about it is
you agree with all the points, even the ones that contradicted the others. Even the point where Mark said this is about race. Well, that's not fence sitting, is it?
with each successive election that we've had, you've seen less and less of the black population fall for the tricks of the Democratic Party. And I think that's a big part of it. From Obama's
Really? Well, the women voted for Harris. So I guess the men are the smart ones. Is that it, Marcus?
sold us on a lot of things which he did not do, and left us having to do a lot of defending Obama on the back half, even on certain times when we didn't agree with things. And I found myself, especially when I was in Florida, having to defend Obama because of racism. Not that I agree with his policies. And so from Obama fooling us, then people feeling like, well, you got to vote for Hillary, and then seeing more and more as more information has come out about.
I think we've heard enough of this. This is over an hour, but you know something? I made my point. You see what happens here? Each and every time they find there is a men's issue, black men are the ones who didn't vote Democratic. The black women did. So obviously it's a men's issues. Then you get clowns like this who admit it's a men's issue, then try and backtrack and say it's not. It's all gender neutral. And we got to think of women as well. Right? These people do it every time.
Powered by young men to the right.
Oops, sorry. Back that up.
That the Democratic Party dug for themselves. This is the hole that they've dug for themselves. They have no one to blame but them.
To even care about that. And then unfortunately saw one of the largest shifts, mainly powered by young men to the right, in over 20 years of Democratic, or in 20 years of elections history. And if we don't start to acknowledge this problem, it's only going to get worse. And it's going to get worse, not only for our party, but for people across the country, because men are going to keep going more and more to the right.
Yeah, we got to acknowledge this problem, guys. We got to acknowledge that men are going to the right, but it's not because the left is hostile to men, right? And it affects women equally, and it's a false dichotomy that this is about a gender issue. So, dude, you are the problem that you were talking about. Yeah, it is going to get worse because of guys like you. Now, if there's any black men listening to this video, start voicing on social media. Start voicing what's going on here and say, no, this is a gendered issue. It's due to the hostility people have towards men, and men have to be looked after. You've got to kick the feminist out. That's what you guys have to actually say. You got to be open about the fact that women are hostile to men. It shows in government. And there's the feminist movement has to be kicked out. It's a hate movement. You got to say it's a hate movement. And you got to stop holding out an olive branch to your political opposition, which is the woman across the way of you, across the table. This guy's holding out an olive branch to people who are going to slap it away. You can't be gender neutral on a gendered topic. Period. There, that's all we have to say about this.